Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Face It. I'm Sean SPM, your host. You're watching a podcast we created all about the PPE industry, and today we are happy to have Kinectrics on with us from Toronto, Ontario. We're going to be speaking with Elan Thomas, who's the Corporate Relations Director over there at the company. This laboratory tests everything from lawnmowers to nuclear power plant materials, and lucky for us, all the things we use to make surgical masks with. So he's a perfect guest for the program. Ladies and gentlemen, let's face it, let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Face It. This is a podcast all about the PPE industry. My name is Sean, your host, and today I am super stoked to have, I guess, what I would consider a rock star in our PPE industry here. I've got Mr. Elan Thomas in here from Kinectrics out in Toronto, Ontario. Elan, welcome to the program.
Hi, Sean. Good to be here.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So it's been great to have met you over this last year. You've been a real go-to guy for us in terms of just knowledge in the industry in general. So I just wanted to get your perspective about how many other companies like us you might have come across over this last year, and what it's been like for you to deal with the ramp up from the pandemic.
Well, the last year has really been a really interesting year. We started, I guess, about a year ago, last April, with from zero. We didn't have testing equipment. We had a lot of smart people working in the lab, and we saw a need that North America and the world needed better opportunities to make sure that their PPE is good. And so we quickly ramped up. We bought equipment. We got it certified, and then we've been testing, since I guess August of last year. Dealt with over 300 new clients in less than a year, which is, if you start thinking about it, that's one a day or one or two a day. Of new clients, people that we haven't dealt with before, that came in through our doors, and generally the response has been excellent.
The response, you mean, as terms of the products that you're testing, or just the clientele in general?
I think the clients have been appreciative of the work that we do. We don't. I mean, we are we are a for-profit company, so we can say that. But also, we want to work with manufacturers or importers to make sure that the products that they're putting out into the marketplace are of the highest quality.
Sure.
If they don't need the tests, then we're not going to recommend it, right? And I think people appreciate that when we say, you've got good stuff, so you have good products, so why don't we test for this? And instead of, upselling them into things that they don't need.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there is a real integral process. I mean, it goes without saying with with your approach and with your corner of the space here. I mean, you guys are the guardians of the standards, if you will, right? In that sense.
I mean, the standards are published. We follow the standards. We sit on committees that make decisions about how the standards should be changed, and that's kind of how we operate. The standards are the yardstick which we are measuring,
Right.
so that's how we operate.
Yeah, of course. So in terms of that yardstick, though, how are things measuring up then? And with the stuff that's coming in, is it majority of people bringing? I mean, are the majority of people bringing in good materials then, or is it?
I think there's really two groups of PPE that we see. We have North American manufacturers, and maybe specifically Canadian manufacturers, that are really producing excellent, high quality PPE, whether it's an N95 mask or a normal 3-ply, or even what we call a face covering, which is like a cloth mask. Those that are manufactured in Canada, they're excellent. When it comes to products from other parts of the world where the quality level may not be as high, we see failures. They don't meet the standards that are required. Sometimes they meet a lower standard, and then we can certify it to that. But generally, most of the products that we test, they do pretty well. I would say from Canadian manufacturers that are up and running, we see 97, I would say, are of the highest quality. From other places like China or Southeast Asia, they maybe it's closer to 90. We do see things that are that aren't what they say they are, and we flag it. So
Sure. Yeah. Well, God bless you. I mean, honestly, like you really are the forefront. I mean, I'm not just being facetious. You guys really are the forefront of this stuff, right? I mean, in all fairness, though, a lot of this subject and this thing is just, completely left field to most people that are outside of the
mhm,
space, right? I mean,
yeah.
like we got different symbols like CSE, ASTM, FDA, NIOSH. Like, what's the top of the pile there in terms of what people should be looking to identify if they're
So
looking at a box? Whatnot.
yeah, so the ASTM and NIOSH are really test organizations. They're the ones that write how are you going to do the test. It gives you the procedure. It gives you, what kinds of things do you have to do? How do you do it? What temperature is it at? How fast does it go? Those kinds of things. Um, you have CSA. I think you wrote CSE here, but it's CSA, which is Canadian Standards Association, and they work closely with Health Canada, and FDA, which is Food and Drug Administration. They are regulatory bodies, and so if they are going to approve the masks or respirators that you've made or that you're testing, they're going to say, did you follow the ASTM method? And if so, then we will give you kind of a stamp of approval. Now, often when we test one batch of material according to ASTM, the FDA or CSA may say, well, that's nice. You produced one batch, but let's see what you can do with 5 batches or 10 batches, and make sure that you have the consistency of production of your PPE. So that's the difference. You have some people that make the rules of this is how we're going to test it, and other people that say, okay, let's look at the regulatory and the process.
Right. That's fascinating. So it seems like there is different certification for different parts of the world that matter, and then there's ones that kind of overlap those other ones. Is is that accurate?
Yeah, that's true. I
Yeah.
think I mean, Europe has their own regulatory body.
Right.
So there's some things that may pass in Europe that may not pass in the US.
Right.
And Canada is a little bit different. See, the US is really kind of, I guess, taken the lead in terms of how stringent they want to be,
Hmm.
and then others are kind of looking at it and saying, yeah, okay, well either that makes sense or it doesn't.
Right.
Um, it's and you have this real dichotomy of people that were producing masks long before the pandemic, and that were they were selling to hospitals and dentist office that were using these products before, and then you have with the pandemic there was a call out for, well, we need to shorten the supply chain. We need to make sure that we have a appropriate supply of PPE, and so there are new manufacturers that have come out of the woodwork and really make excellent products. But when you're a new company and maybe smaller uh, than others or well-established ones, it sometimes becomes a hardship to say, well, we know we make good product, but we can't afford to do all the testing that a large, well-established company can. And so you have to balance those two things, in terms of how do you run your business? How do we foster the ability of small local businesses to be successful, but still maintain the quality for the population?
Right. Right. Well, what's fascinating to me, and then kind of the reason why we're talking today, is because of this new reality and this new PPE industry that's now in Canada. I mean, what I've been hearing is Canada is trying to, standardize their own methods in terms of testing. Could you speak to that a little bit and what you might know about that?
Sure. So CSA and Health Canada are working together to develop a standard for different types of PPE, whether it's three-ply masks or N95 masks. And then N95 are respirators, and three-ply I would call them masks or procedural masks. The CSA is trying to come up with a standard based on the ASTM. So ASTM tells you how you're going to test, and then CSA will say how many of those tests do you need to complete. How often do we need to come and inspect your facility to make sure that your production is good? How often do you need to test within a run or a batch, what we call, or a lot of PPE? Some people call a lot one skid of PPE. Some people will call a lot 1 week's worth of testing. And it's really up to the manufacturer to look at that and make a decision for themselves. And then CSA will say, sorry, you're making 100,000. That's not sufficient that you only test 5. You need to test 30. And I'm just using these as theoretical numbers. But that's what CSA is going to do. So they will make sure that you are testing from a accredited laboratory to are you operating in an appropriate way to make sure that you maintain the highest level of standards. Now, when I talk to people and they say, well, can you make recommendations on what a lot size should be? And right now, there's no real, there's not a lot of direction, let's say, in terms of how big a lot can be. But I tell people, I said, you need to be comfortable that if you have to do a recall on a lot because there's a failure, then how is that going to impact your company? Are you going to be able to recall 2 million masks that are out there? And is that going to, collapse your company? And if it is, then maybe that's too high. Do you need to test every 500? That's probably too much. So you need to find that point where it's comfortable for the manufacturers they have to be comfortable that the products that they're sending out are of high quality, and but without undue stress on the testing. I think normally I tell people, I said that once a week sounds about right to me, depending on how many you're asking. But I'm just using that as kind of a rule of thumb.
Wow. Once a week in terms of frequency to pull random samples?
So right. So some people they will do their own testing in-house, and they do that every day. They'll look at certain parameters in terms of, are the ear loops tight? Are they, are the welds being done properly? Those kinds of things. And those are done every day as part of any production line, whether it's masks or some other product. But there's some times that you need to say, I can't do this kind of test as required in ASTM. And so we send it out to external laboratories like Kinectrics.
I guess in terms of the recall, though, what comes to mind when you say that, though, that's something, that part of it is done by Health Canada, right?
That part is typically done by Health Canada. That's correct.
Yeah. So you've been working closely with the Health Canada through this whole pandemic. What's been your experience with dealing with that organization?
Well, Health Canada is great in terms of the work that they do, but they're very busy people, and we, as a test lab, we need information from them sometimes, and sometimes it takes a while for them to get back. I think for manufacturers or importers, I think it's a little bit challenging for them to reach out to the federal government and say, hey, we need some direction, and then just hear silence. And I think that's part of the reason that Health Canada and CSA have started to work together a little bit more closely, is so now Health Canada can say, if it's dealing with masks or PPE, go talk to CSA and let them help you, and they'll provide direction. I think what some people maybe don't know is that CSA is a for-profit organization. They don't come and inspect your lab out of the goodness of their heart. There's fees associated with that. So they, if you want to get your PPE certified by CSA, then there's a licensing fee, and you have to, and there's an ongoing charge every year.
Right. Well, I actually want to just go back a little bit for something you said earlier,
Sure.
which was kind of fascinates me. And I've talked about this with other guests before too. It's just the fact that there actually were, insufficient masks in the market before this, and it's kind of an odd phenomenon, right? I mean, I've been hearing about graphene, right? And how it's really harmful and it's a nanofiber. Like, I guess, how was this discovered to be a problem?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Let's talk about the supply of PPE. Talk about that first, and then we can talk a little bit about graphene. So when the pandemic hit, there was a shortage of PPE, and I think most people will remember that. Well, how do I get it? How do I get good masks, and where can I get them? And you would order it, and things would arrive a month later. There was a real problem with the supply chain because most of the PPE was coming from Asia. As part of that, the Canadian government, and I'll speak about the Canadian government, we're based in Canada, but the Canadian government dropped tariffs on PPE coming from Asia in order to help get it to hospitals and healthcare providers at a lower cost, and to get the flow of products moving. And then they also made calls to Canadian manufacturers to start producing. And so now we have enough supply from Canada to meet the needs of healthcare providers. And I think somewhere around 70 to 80% of all PPE could be produced in Canada. But the government hasn't dropped the tariffs yet, and hasn't put the tariffs back yet on importing. So you have Canadian manufacturers that are making high quality products, and you have Asian manufacturers that are making usually high quality products, but not always. But it's really hurting the Canadian market. So if you have a government that says, please, Canada, go and start making these products, and then it doesn't support them at the end, well, that's really harmful for small and local businesses. Now, so that's a little bit about supply. And when you talk about graphene is a it's a nanofiber made out of carbon that some Asian companies had been using this as part of their production. But usually it's not. I mean, you see it every now and then. To be honest, we don't even test it because it's so insignificant in terms of an issue that we just don't deal with it anymore. Canadian manufacturers don't use it at all, and most of the products that we're testing now are made in Canada. So that's my story.
Fair enough. So it's a non-issue for that matter. I mean,
I think it's a non-issue. I think it's somehow got into the newspapers, and people,
isn't that funny?
This is and people thought it was a disaster, but it's really not.
Yeah, that's crazy. Eh? So there has been a lot of excitement in the air, though, depending who you talk to, I guess. But in our circle, because there's been a lot of advancement. A lot of people are working hard really every day that people don't even realize. And what I'm getting to is Canadian Association of PPE Manufacturers. CAPMA.
Correct. Right.
And what's been interesting is actually just talking through the troubles and the common ground we've all been kind of going through with the pandemic, and then also, especially in our office anyway, we're talking a lot about the post-pandemic plan. What's your point of view on that? Where you see the industry kind of going after the pandemic is happening, like where all of us can kind of look forward to?
Geez. So I think that post-pandemic, there will still be, I think there'll still be need. Let me back up. but there will always be need for PPE, whether it's, healthcare providers or, I guess are the predominant users, whether it's doctors, dentists, nurses, operating rooms. You're always going to need PPE. We might not need it at the same level that we needed it 6 months ago, and in the height of the pandemic. But I think that we are moving to a world where PPE is going to be part of our life for a long time. The vaccines are rolling out, but I can tell you when I go out, I've got my first dose, and when I go out, I still wear a mask. When you go into any store or do my groceries, you wear a mask. When I get on the subway or take a public transit, I'm going to be wearing a mask, and I don't see that changing, at least for me, in terms of for a long time. I used to ride the subway, and I would see some people wearing masks on the subway. I thought, what are those people doing? Like, do they think there's something out there? But now I think we've all seen what can happen, especially in crowded situations. And I think you also look at people wearing masks and the impact that it's had on other viruses like influenza, which is essentially dropped, at least in North America, because people are wearing masks. Well, I don't want to get the flu. I don't want to get other viruses, and whether it's COVID or otherwise. I think people are going to be afraid for a long time to do those kind of activities without wearing some kind of PPE.
Yeah.
And we talk about the COVID pandemic, but there were other viruses that came out, whether it's SARS or MERS that came to North America, and I think the next time you have those two came out within the last 10 years, and you start looking at it and say, well, anytime there's a situation where you have an outbreak of the bird flu or something like that, which I think they just identified one in China, people are going to, jump up again and say, oh, let's pull those masks right out of storage and start wearing them again on a regular basis before we get to this kind of pandemic.
Sure.
So I think while PPE use will drop in the general population, I don't think it's going away.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, really, if you look at it, it's almost like the silver lining of COVID. Is that some other common sense came through, if I dare say,
Right.
But you know what? Another silver lining is for me, just a segue, is meeting you, sir. And I really appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time. I know
Sure.
you're a busy guy. I
Sure.
can hear some kids in the background. You're probably on your day off.
Right.
We look forward to catching up with you again and to keeping in touch with you as the industry and things progress. We've certainly got some new things coming down the line. So at that, I'll bid you farewell and thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, you will have Elan Thomas's links below here, and we'll have some stuff about Kinectrics as well for you to click into. I want to thank everyone for watching the show, and until next time, please stay covered, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Sean. It was a pleasure.